sponsored program are strictly those of the host, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of this station, its staff, management, or sponsors.
In the words of Katharine Hepburn, if you obey all the rules, you'll miss all the fun.
We couldn't agree more.
I'm Karen Hansen.
And I'm Laura Rockland. Welcome to Wren Roch. We'll entertain, inspire, and empower you to be yourself, love yourself, and trust yourself to take chances.
After all, if you only get one life, you might as well make it a great one. Hi, welcome to Wren Roch. I'm Karen Hansen.
And I'm Laura Rockland. And the mission of our brand, Wren Roch, is to empower victims and survivors of rape, domestic violence, and childhood sexual assault, because we are survivors and we are empowered.
Yes, and the mission of our show is to highlight others who are advocating for changing the world and making it a better place.
Tonight, we would like to thank our sponsors, Ivy Lee's Luxe Makeup and Beauty Lounge, located on 233 South Federal Highway in the Boca Grande building. So thank you to Lisa for this fabulous glam makeover and the eyelashes.
Love the eyelashes. Thank you, Lisa.
Yes, they also do makeup tutorials and big events for weddings or whatever you have in mind. So keep them in mind for your next makeover. Also, our other sponsor this evening, this is very exciting, so I hope all of you are listening carefully. Movietickets.com is our sponsor, and they are giving away a $50 gift card to the movies if you call into our show. So the very first caller this evening will receive a $50 gift card. The call-in number is 888-565-1470. So we're anxious to hear your call, see if you have any questions for us or our guest this evening. And last, we want to thank Dawn DeMarco with Sparkle of Life, where giving is fashionable, for sponsoring our jewelry this evening. Dawn makes all the jewelry. So my beautiful chandelier earrings and Karen's necklace that she's wearing. She actually has it on backwards. It's more like a cape from the back. Very beautiful. So check out Dawn's jewelry on sparkleoflife.com.
Yes. So we have a very exciting show tonight. We have Jeff Herman with Herman Law. And before we get to Jeff, we again want to encourage you to call in with any questions. If you have any comments, we didn't realize this last week, but you can actually write in on our Facebook live stream. So we'll get your comments here on screen so we can answer questions or talk about whatever subjects.
Yes. So we apologize for like past shows where we didn't see your comments coming through. So now we're going to pay attention to the TV monitor and address those if we can. So thank you all for being so engaging. And
I have to give a quick shout out to my grandmother who's turning 94 today. So happy birthday, Grandma.
Happy birthday, Grace. We actually have a handbag named after Grace called Amazing Grace.
Yes.
She's pretty amazing.
Yes, she is.
So you can also listen to us on 95.3 FM and 1470 AM. For those of you that are following Wren Roch, check us out on social media on Instagram, Twitter, and of course our Facebook page and our website, which is wrenandroch.com, www.wrenandroch.com, to find out what's happening in our world.
Yes, and you can also sponsor our show, the TV and radio show that you're watching or listening to now, or you can donate to the Wren Roch Foundation, which is a 501c3. I never get that right. But anyway, all of the contributions are tax deductible, and those contributions help fund our speaking engagements around the country, such as going to the United Nations next month, which is on our agenda. And we're currently in talks with a sorority at Florida State University to go and speak about college campus sexual assault. So,
especially right now when kids are going back to school.
Yes, so those donations are very important to help us fund all of those engagements.
And for those of you who would like to purchase an item other than a handbag or an accessory, you can go onto our website at the header image. We have B3 Studio products. There's Wren Roch tank tops, T-shirts, mugs. So check us out. And 50% of the proceeds go to the Wren Roch Foundation.
Yes. All right. So on that note, let's introduce officially our guest, which we're very, very excited about, Jeff Herman.
So Jeff is recognized as a national leading attorney who represents victims of sexual assault. He's very passionate about it. He wants to break the silence and he's literally the voice for victims. He's won many pretty high-profile cases. He exposed the clergy with their sexual abuse scandal, the Archdiocese of Miami, Archdiocese of Denver. He's been on like every news station across this country, and we're so super happy to have him here tonight. So thank you, Jeff.
Thank you,
Jeff.
Glad to be here.
And P.S., Jeff is also representing my daughter in her civil case for the sexual assault that she experienced several years ago. So, and he's doing that pro bono, by the way. So Jeff is amazing,
Yes.
and we're very grateful. Can't even say how much because I always burst into tears, which I'm not going to do today, hopefully. So let's get into our questions, because the way we organize the questions for all of you watching and listening is we thought to ourselves, we have 27 minutes. What are the most important things that listeners, parents, or friends, anyone who comes into contact with children, what are the most important things that they need to know about childhood sexual assault and how to prevent it, the things to look out for? So that's what we're going to focus on tonight. So we have a few questions for Jeff. So number one, Jeff, who are child molesters? Everyone thinks of like stranger danger. It's someone who comes out from the bushes, but tell us who the child molesters really are and who they need to look out for.
Right. So good question. Because when I grew up, it was all about stranger danger, which we now know is, of course, strangers can be dangerous, but statistically, your child is more likely to be abused by somebody you know. 90% of kids are abused by somebody they know. So it's not typically the stranger, the man in the park. It is a man, probably, because I think about 90% of pedophiles are male. And it's someone who's put themselves in your kid's life. It could be a family member, it could be an uncle, could be a coach, it could be a teacher, it could be anyone who has access to your child. And so, it's a scary thought. And what's really hard for people and parents to understand is that the person you're telling your child to trust is potentially a person who is going to assault your child.
Right. So it sends mixed signals. I mean, in my daughter's case, it was her stepfather. So that is someone that we had brought into our lives, trusting them, and it didn't go very well.
And I think that kids, back in our days, we were taught like respect adults and go give Uncle so-and-so a hug or go sit on so-and-so's lap. And you have to listen to kids. If they don't want to do that, don't force them.
Right.
Make them be respectful of their bodies and give them that choice.
Absolutely.
So, what are signs to look for in terms of grooming, and explain to the listeners what is grooming? Because I had my daughter actually listen to your interview last night, and my 12-year-old son. He's like, "Mom, what's grooming?" So
okay, so grooming is the concept where a predator is going to engage in behaviors to make your child more comfortable, ultimately with the goal of sexually abusing them. And so, for example, grooming might be a touch that starts up on the shoulder, and predators are testing. They want to see, can I go further? The child who might pull back right away and respond, well, maybe this predator is moving on to the next person. But grooming is designed by the predator to break down their resistance. Oftentimes we see parents groomed as well. So you might find, and this is, one of the things, and this is really hard for people to understand, is that the person who's so charismatic with their child is potentially, we find out the person who's abusing the child, because in their mind, they love kids. They just love them in a very perverse way.
Right.
I always think of, Jerry Sandusky. There was a very famous interview he did where he was asked, would you harm a child? And he goes, no, I love children. Well, in his mind, he really does.
Right.
So grooming is behavior. You might see tickling. You'll see hugging. When an adult wants to spend alone time with your child, that's a big red flag.
Right.
And so those are things, parents should be looking out for.
And also, I just had a conversation today with someone whose daughter was a victim of sexual assault, and she talked about buying expensive gifts, buying nice things, things like that, taking them places, doting on them, things like that can also be a sign.
Right. Those are all things that we see predators doing to gain the trust and the attention to ultimately coerce the child. So what happens is there's all these behaviors that might take place that are called grooming, like buying them gifts, giving them special attention, making the child feel good. ultimately, when the sex begins to take place, that becomes very complicated and confusing for the victim.
Right.
Because most victims, after they've been groomed, are what we call compliant victims, meaning they physically participate. Now, they don't consent. They're kids. They can't consent.
Right.
But because the child is physically participating in the sexual behaviors, they now feel like they've done something wrong. And it's very confusing, on top of embarrassing. And so this is one of the reasons that many victims wait many, many years and sometimes decades to come forward and talk about what happened.
Right. And I think that's something people don't understand, that the victim is actually blaming themselves for what happened. And like you said, it's embarrassing. When it's a child, they don't even know how to explain what's even happened to them.
Right. And how much of it have they suppressed and they blocked out? I don't know if that's typical or...
Yeah, I mean, for some kids, and it's rare to have a real repressed memory, but a lot of kids, a lot of victims will repress it.
Right.
But they don't want to really think about it, and they don't want to deal with it. And because they think they've done something wrong, they're not going to talk about it. Look, when kids grow up and have typical sexual relationships with other, age-appropriate kids or teenagers, they don't come home and tell their parents about it.
Exactly.
So, what makes us think
Well,
when
they
there's...
might, if
when
you're
it's,
lucky, but...
Rarely. But so, you think about that. So atypical sexual behaviors, kids aren't coming home and telling their parents. And so it is complicated, and that's why it's hard for kids to come forward.
Right. And I know you just said this when I watched, your interview yesterday, but you said that a lot of times this is the child's first sexual experience. So what happens is when that happens to your child and they're a young age, that's their memory of, like you said, their first sexual experience ever.
Yeah.
We missed one little thing based on your video from yesterday. Can you talk about a child sitting on a man's lap? Because I know that's one of the cases that you have going on right now. I just want you to tell people specifically how you feel about that, because I know you're pretty passionate about it.
Okay,
and men in daycare, working in daycare.
And men working in daycares, because we want to
Right.
be a little controversial here.
Right. So I just don't have one case where a child was abused after being groomed by sitting on a man's lap. I have several cases, and I see that all the time. My opinion is that kids don't belong on a stranger, not a stranger, but a man's lap that's not their parent.
Right.
They just don't belong there. And in these daycares and preschools, there's no reason to be on some man's lap. And it's because we know that's a grooming behavior. And the kids are very vulnerable in that situation. And frankly, kids are no match for a seasoned predator.
Right.
And so we as adults, and certainly adults who are charged with protecting kids in daycares and preschools, must not only know about the things, but not be shy about taking action and preventing it. Yeah. I also have the opinion, I don't think men should be working in daycares and preschools. And so, it's not necessarily a popular opinion, but statistically, I don't think it's necessary, and it's dangerous, frankly. And it doesn't mean every man, of course, is not a predator.
Right.
But we do know most predators are males, and so when kids are so young, I don't see the reason for it.
Yeah, I heard a saying this week that said most men are not monsters, but most monsters are men. So it's kind of
Absolutely
the same thing in a little more dramatic way.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next question is, what should parents do if their child has been sexually abused? What's the first step that they should take? Who should they call? Where should they go? And have we talked yet about I can't remember if we've already said this, the signs of abuse if a child has not already come
Most
forward?
parents don't
What
think
do
it's
they
going
look
to
out
happen.
for?
So how do you
identify it? And then if it is happening, what do you do?
Right. So, and this is a tough part. There's no handbook for parents,
Right.
of course, in terms of, all of a sudden this happens. They found out their child's abused, and, their whole life has collapsed. It's every parent's worst nightmare.
Yes, it is, officially. And you never think it's going to happen to you.
Right.
So.
Right. And so, I always, from my perspective, we always focus on helping victims heal. And I think there's 3 pillars that are focused on that. And in terms of what a parent should do, of course, the first thing is to call the authorities. It's a crime, and it should be reported.
Right.
Now, having said that, most of these cases do not get criminally prosecuted, and maybe we can talk about that later.
Yes, definitely.
But it doesn't mean you don't report it. You need to report it, and then you let the authorities do their thing.
Is that like your local police department? Is it who do they call?
Yeah,
like
who's the
911
first,
or
like,
who do
point
they
of
call to
contact?
report it?
911's a great place, but also,
Okay.
Depending on where it took place, there's an abuse hotline. And so you can report it to the abuse hotline. They'll communicate with police authorities, et cetera. So you call the criminal authorities. If it's at a school, for example, depending if it's a report that's sort of an abuse that took place prior, like some sort of, not that day or not just, very,
Right.
very recent, you can call the abuse hotline and then call the police. But if it's something that's going, the teachers or the person still there, you call the police. It's a crime and report that right away. Now, it's important, I think, from the victim's perspective that you report the crime because it validates for a child that a crime was committed and it's not their fault.
Right.
Yes.
And someone believes me.
Yes, yeah, and
That's
that's
the other thing.
important. And let's talk about the second pillar, which is support, and that's professional therapy and familiar support. And like what Laura just commented is that someone believes me, and that's it. I mean, parents,
Huge.
you need to let your kids know you believe them.
I always say kids don't make these things up. They don't even know to make it up. So when they come to you and tell you, they're already confused, embarrassed, and it's hard for them to say. So if they're bringing it out there, believe them. And I always, parents say, well, what should someone do if a child tells and no one believes them? And we always say, just keep telling, tell the next person, tell the next person, tell the next person until someone believes you.
We're going to take a quick commercial break, and we'll be back shortly.
All right.
Thank you.
Times are tough, and right now those in the commercial world know that being heard via advertisements is the name of the game. AmpSquare.tv understands how important advertisement is and is proud to express that it's truly the only plugged-in internet television production company on the market. Amp2.tv live streams all their shows across all the major selling markets in the U.S. and abroad. Call them at 866-224-5422. The AmpSquare.tv library allows productions to be seen over and over again, making commercial platforms more usable. Call 866-224-5422. Toll free 866-224-5422. Amp2.tv, the first and only internet television network that's truly plugged in. 866-224-5422. That's AMP2.TV.
Break time is over.
Welcome back to the show. Thank you all. Again, we're still waiting for some callers. We have a $50 gift certificate from movietickets.com. We want to hear your questions. Please call in if you have a question for Jeff or for Wren Roch. Also, again, our Wren Roch Foundation, we are accepting donations. We, again, have product on our website. If you'd like to buy a t-shirt, a tank top, a coffee mug, all of it helps to get our message out there, to spread awareness and allow us to go out there and empower other people to not become victims of any of these types of abuse.
Right. And
Again,
don't forget our handbags, which are also made in New York City. So we're very proud of that. as well.
Exactly. So, again, the call-in number, just in case you didn't write it down the first time, is 888-565-1470. Again, 888-565-1470. All right, Jeff, back to the third pillar.
Okay, so we talked about reporting it to the criminal authorities and then getting therapy. And then the third pillar is a civil case. And that's primarily what I do. And that's representing victims bringing civil cases, which are different than the criminal cases. And there's some important distinctions. So in the criminal case is where somebody potentially goes to jail. They get charged with a crime. But the victim is not a party to the criminal case. They're a witness. And so oftentimes that's frustrating because they have really no control.
Right.
And so they may want to prosecute it, and the police or the state attorney may say, no, it's our call, we're not prosecuting. The civil case, however, is where the victim is a party. It's where the victim brings a claim against the perpetrator potentially. Most of my cases are against institutions that hired this perpetrator, and that's a civil case for money damages. Of course, money does not make a victim whole. I
Right.
mean, in terms of there's no magic wand,
Right,
no
right.
snap of the fingers. We can't undo it. but it's a measure of justice. And oftentimes I've seen that's really important to help victims begin to heal and start that process.
And the validation for what they've been through. And again, it doesn't take away what happened, but at least, therapy and everything else, they can move on, hopefully, with their life.
Absolutely. And I've seen cases where we have gone to trial. One case in particular, we had an 8-year-old boy I brought in who was victimized, and he testified. And for this little boy, when we won that case, but for this boy, it was being validated by a jury that they believed him.
Exactly.
And it was very rewarding for me, because after we got this verdict, the next day his mom calls me and says he wants to speak to you, and he says, Jeff, thank you for believing me. So
that's why you do what you do, Jeff.
Yeah.
We actually have a caller on the line. We have Faith.
Hey, ladies, how are you?
Hi.
Good.
Faith.
How are you, Faith?
I'm great. It's great to talk to you. I'm kind of catching just that little tail end of the conversation. I'm assuming that this gentleman is an attorney. Is that correct?
Yes, he is one of the nation's leading attorneys who represents victims of sexual abuse. It's Jeff Herman.
Wow.
Say hi, Jeff.
Okay. Hi, Jeff.
Hello.
Yes, it is not a pretty thing for anyone to ever have to, A, experience, and B, go through the aftermath of how it affects your life in so many different ways. Being a pharmacist and having people come to the pharmacy and have all sorts of problems, and then you begin to question them, you discover that sometimes there's a lot more going on than what would meet the eye.
Absolutely. It's very complicated. But we really appreciate you calling in, Faith. And just so you know, you are our winner of the $50 gift certificate for movietickets.com. So thank you for listening. And, catch the end of our show here. We're going to get back with Jeff. But thank you again.
Thank you, Faith.
That's great. Thanks, ladies. Thanks, Jeff. Take care.
Thank you. So Faith, brings up a sort of an important point about what happens to victims. And what we see is a lot of victims of childhood sexual assaults develop post-traumatic stress disorder. And probably some of the medications, that she's talking about is to deal with that. And it's because it's a trauma. And these kinds of traumas can revisit victims. And that's why it's important to get help and to get therapy.
Exactly. We actually have another caller on the line.
Okay.
Who do we have?
This is Carmela.
Hi, Carmela. It's my sister.
Do you have a question for Jeff, Carmela?
Yes. My question was, how do you prepare your kids or explain to your kids stuff like this, like how to prepare in case something happens?
That's a great question, because that was the next on our list. So thank you.
Thank you, Carmela.
Right. So how do you talk to a child and prepare them to defend themselves, right? And so, of course, these are all sort of age-appropriate conversations you need to have with your child. But first of all, I think parents have to understand that it's their burden to protect their kids. Kids, as I said before, I think are no match for a seasoned predator. Right. So what that means is that you don't leave your kids alone with men. And one of the best pieces of advice I can give parents is that you don't leave your child alone with a man until your child is old enough to understand that the person most likely to abuse them is the person you're telling them to trust. And so, what age is that? Every child's different. But when your child's old enough to understand that the person who you're, sending them off with, is potentially the person they have to be careful about, then that's the right time.
Do you think that 95% of abuse can be prevented through education and preparing our kids, or is that not a real?
Wow, I don't know what the number. I don't know what the number would be. I certainly believe that we can prevent a lot of it.
Like with these books, that are appropriate to read to kids when they're 3-4 years old, and talking openly about these subjects. Is that?
Sure. Interestingly, I just filed a case last week up in Maryland, and in that case, there was a teacher who was abusing kids for decades.
Right.
And this little girl, who was 11 years old at the time, had been abused for a few years at that school. Never talked about it. But the school presented a class about protecting your body. And after, literally in that class, after hearing this information, she realized that she was a victim. And a teacher saw and noticed and observed that something was wrong with her and said, "What's wrong?" She said, "I think, Mr. in this case, Mr. Vigna, John Vigna, a predator who was just convicted pedophile up in Montgomery County in Maryland, was her teacher. And she said, he's touching me in a way that you're saying he shouldn't be." The police investigated. He got charged. He was just convicted a few weeks ago, sentenced, I think, to 60 years in prison. But he had been abusing kids for decades.
And that's exactly why we wanted to do this show, and why we've told everyone, not just parents, to watch this show and to listen, because anyone who's not a parent could also be the person who intercepts that information or could be looking out for kids and seeing what the signs are.
We just have a couple more minutes here, so let's get to the last two questions quickly. Maybe they can be twofold.
Yes. So we would like to know why more predators are not charged criminally and convicted or convicted, but then also, what is the biggest loophole in the criminal system? How do they get away with it?
So here's what happens in criminal cases.
And why are civil cases so important?
Go, you have 2 minutes.
Go.
Okay. So it has to do with what we call the burden of proof. So the burden of proof in a criminal case, as everyone's probably heard on TV, is beyond a reasonable doubt.
Right.
So to prove a criminal case, when you have the classic sex abuse case, is he said, she said. And so most times it's not enough to convict somebody, because you have an adult saying one thing, the child saying another, and so the prosecutors say, there's always going to be reasonable doubt.
Right.
That's sort of the basic fundamental answer. That's why most of the cases don't get charged and or prosecuted.
Loophole. Tell us that.
It's, I don't know if that's a loophole. It's really just the fact that the cases are tough. And so, and what's frustrating is that the younger the victim, the harder it is to prosecute. And so you see cases where the victims are really young, and the state says, these kids aren't even old enough to testify.
Right.
Which is why the civil cases are so important. Because in the civil cases, the burden of proof is more likely than not, what we say, greater than 50%. Or I always say, if you think it happened, that's enough.
Right. And at least it's in writing, in black and white.
So check out Jeff's website if you need any help. He's here to help us all. So thank you, Jeff. We appreciate your time this evening. And thank you all for listening to Wren Roch. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us for today's show.
Please join us at the same time next week for your weekly dose of entertainment, inspiration, and empowerment.
We'll see you next week.
The opinions expressed on the preceding sponsored program were strictly those of its host, guests, and